Okay, I don't know how distracting this is going to be. I don't know if you guys can hear it. You probably can hear it. I'll watch this after to see, but I don't know how to turn off the fan in the central system of air conditioning. I tried on the little screen thing, which is very modern, I have to say. This is like a luxury building. I'm at my Airbnb. And the thing is, like, this is what you get when you live in places like Houston, Texas. You can get way more for your buck, and you can get, like, for the same amount of money, you can live in a building like this. But the thing is, would you want to live in Houston? I personally wouldn't want to live here, and I'll tell you guys why. First impressions of Houston. Off the bat, I've never been to Houston before. I have been to Texas once. I went to Austin, Texas back in 2018. I hadn't made a video at that time specifically about Austin, but I had made a video called Gay Dating in the South, where for 6 weeks I went to a different city every week, and Austin was one of them. And it's funny because I'm now realizing, like, I don't think it's a Houston thing. I think it might just be like an American South thing, because I'm realizing it felt familiar. Certain things here reminded me of Austin. Certain things also reminded me of when I went to New Orleans in that same trip in 2018. And what I mean by that is, I think the South is just like built differently than the rest of the country, or at least the Northeast. And I guess Southern California. I can't say that I'm familiar with the rest of America. There's something here, like the way the city's built, it's very spread out, and I chose to stay in the walkable neighborhood. Like, I made sure whenever I travel, if there's a walkable neighborhood, I always try to stay there, because I'm like a New Yorker at heart, right? I'm a pedestrian. I want to be able to explore without a car, get around freely. So I picked a neighborhood that was like the cute, modern, walkable, also happens to be the gay neighborhood, called Montrose. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Montrose. I'm really on the cusp of that and Midtown. But that's like Midtown and Montrose are considered the walkable, like, trendy neighborhoods where people want to live, where they want to stay, right? And it's just been shocking to me to think, like, this is the walkable neighborhood, because, like, even just going to my local coffee shop, the closest coffee shop, I had to cross this, like, interstate, what feels like an interstate road. And it's one of those roads where, like, if you're walking on it, you feel like you're a homeless person, because the only other people really walking around there without a car are homeless people. This is a car city. In the same way that really LA is a car city. I mean, I lived in LA, and sometimes I would also feel eerie walking in parts of LA where, like, nobody else is walking. I think the difference here, though, is, like, sometimes I would walk and it felt eerie. Not necessarily unsafe, but just like how deserted it feels. Like certain roads, still in the same neighborhood, and I would pass these like big buildings that just felt like abandoned warehouses, and it just feels weird. And then 3 blocks later, you see a gay bar. Like, I don't know. It's a strange way for a city to be built. But it took me like all week to realize I think this is how the South is in general, versus the Northeast, where I've spent most of my life, where it's just, that's where the oldest cities in America are, right? So it's like way more densely concentrated and populated, both in terms of like infrastructure and just the people, just the population. So it took me a while to realize, like, this is just the pace of Houston. Like, sometimes it feels kind of eerie, and I remember that's how I felt in New Orleans when I would walk around outside the French Quarter, outside the really touristy area. But then I was like, you know what, this could be nice. Like, in certain ways, it must be nice to live somewhere that's always calm, always peaceful. So anyway, the video is supposed to be about my gay experiences. So those are just the first impressions. Now, like I said, I picked a neighborhood that also happens to be like the gay neighborhood, or the gay-friendly neighborhood. And what's really interesting is it's mostly residential, the neighborhood, which also threw me off, that like the walkable neighborhood is mostly residential. Because when I think of like a walkable neighborhood in a city, it's like still kind of urban. But to me here, it really felt like you're either on a residential street or suddenly it becomes very industrial. And when I say industrial, I mean, again, like a huge building that looks like it's a warehouse or was a warehouse or something. So walking around this neighborhood, I would just be on a street with like houses, regular houses, and then suddenly there's a gay bar. And that's been a theme here, that interestingly, like small businesses, like I saw there's a few salons a few streets down, still in the middle of like suburbia. But same thing with the gay bars. They're randomly placed on residential streets here, which I've never seen before. What I did like is that when you check it out on Google Maps, they're all in a cluster. So that's always nice when gay bars are in a cluster, because you feel that there really is like a neighborhood vibe. You know, it's always nice when you're not in a city like, let's say, Los Angeles, where I previously lived at one point, where, you know, you have a neighborhood that only has one or two gay bars, and then the next like neighborhood over that has like a gay bar presence, you have to drive miles to get to, right? So it's nice that it has an authentic community feel, that like you walk a few blocks and then there's another rainbow flag and you know that it's like a community thing. But it did throw me off that they're just randomly among houses. Like, that was so strange to me. So I went out one night. The first bar that I came across walking in the neighborhood was the Eagle Houston. I had no idea there was an Eagle here as well. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Eagle is like, I guess, a chain gay bar. And I was pleasantly surprised. Like, first off, just the area, the neighborhood, like, really came alive at night. Remember I mentioned that during the day, walking around would feel kind of eerie, how deserted it would feel. Well, at night, it was a totally different thing. And again, it's like weird because it's a neighborhood with residential, you know, streets, and there's people everywhere, like, walking around, going from bar to bar. So it was kind of a nice, unusual, but like a nice difference, I guess, culturally. And the Eagle, I was pleasantly surprised that it was actually a really big space, with like different floors. There was a rooftop patio, and it was actually pretty busy. And then I walked around to a few other places. A few other places were packed. Now, I did talk to a few guys briefly on apps. Typical experience, I found that in a city like this, that's a smaller city, there's less guys that are, you know, interesting, dynamic. But the guys that I did talk to were really nice and like more, just from a first impression, just more polite and respectful than I'm used to in a place like Miami, or even back when I lived in New York or LA. So that's what's funny with smaller cities. I feel like you have fewer options just from the lot, right? Just like swiping away or on Tinder or whatever. There's less sort of intrigue, but the people you talk to do seem to be more genuine and respectful. I wish there was a city where like you have that kindness, but you also have like a lot of interesting, charming people to talk to. Honestly, I feel like it's easier with that outside of the States. I feel like outside of the States, like in Paris, I feel like it's more part of the culture to be respectful and polite, and charming. In America, I feel like that's just not, it's not valued the same way. So that's been my experience in Houston. I would say overall, I've been pleasantly surprised that there is like a gay neighborhood, a gay presence. I think I just don't really love the city itself beyond the gay dating stuff. So for me, like, I can't imagine living here. But I would say as a tourist, like if I came here with a group of friends, I could see it being fun, like bar hopping and doing local stuff. One of the guys I talked to on Tinder was like, Houston is not a place you come to vacation or you come to visit. Houston is a place to settle down, to live, to have like a calm life. And so I thought that was an interesting comment, especially as somebody who's always lived in cities that are very tourist heavy. New York City, Miami, LA, especially Miami. I mean, it's known for tourism. So it's interesting to see the total opposite of a place that is less about hospitality and tourism and more about like a local sort of culture or presence. I think I've honestly just been spoiled by these bigger cities that are more sort of dynamic and type A. When you come to a place like this, having had that experience and background, it just feels very eerie, like the pace, the way the city's sort of spread out and built. But definitely nice to see that there's a true like community here, gay neighborhood, gay community.